Establishing good credit is one of the most important rites of passage to adulthood. For those who are lucky to live with their parents, good for you. In fact, Pew Research indicated that 17.8% of adults aged 25 to 34 lived at home in 2019, which means greater than 80% did not. Living that endless life of turn-ups, Patron-laced parties, lavish trips and shopping is fine if you've saved and you have controlled spending and saving habits. However, when you lack discipline and you're just living for the next party, you can soon find yourself in trouble. When you take this lack of discipline into a relationship with someone who equally lacks discipline, that's where problems can begin. You see, the number one thing married couples argue about is money. That's right, money. More than about chores, together time, sex, snoring, or even what's for dinner. To those young adults who did remain home and save, bravo, because when you step out into life, you'll be prepared, probably debt-free, with established credit, and ready to take on the important things in your life, like starting a business or starting a family. But you see, once the wedding is over and you begin to expand your lives and your responsibilities, you soon find the need to start making major purchases. Your furniture, your appliances, and yes, even a home. And if you didn't plan or understand the importance of your credit rating, you soon learn that your choices become significantly limited. You may have to rent instead of own, purchase from a buy here, pay here location for necessities, and end up paying much higher rates for insurance and just about everything else because you're considered a credit risk. Your mental health, personal relationships, and overall lifestyle can all suffer as a result of a poor credit score. Don't turn the channel though. Face the fact that it won't get better if you don't do better. And in the next 5 seconds, help will be on its way. Hi, everybody. I want to welcome everyone to another episode of Tabernacle Talks. This is Dr. Michelle, and I am so delighted today to have Tara Alderette. She's the Enterprise Learning Director for Money Management International. Welcome, Tara.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Well, you know, we're talking about one of those subjects that I don't know that a lot of people like to talk about, but it's probably one of the most important topics that a consumer should be talking about, and that's, are you credit worthy? And that's a pretty serious topic, particularly once you become an adult and mom and dad can no longer pay for things. You're going to find out that harsh reality that there's something called credit worthiness that will have a big impact on your life. So I guess before we even get started, because you know I always have questions, can you give us a really good working definition of what it means to be credit worthy?
Yes, that's such a good question. I think when we think about credit worthy, it just means that A, you know where you stand. So there are no questions about whether or not you have good credit or bad credit. So you know where you stand and your bills are paid on time. You're not owing more than you can afford to pay for, but you have wise use of credit established. So I think all those things come together to make somebody credit worthy.
Okay, so that's that person that when you go in to buy something, you don't have this dark cloud over you know what your credit score is. You pretty much know before you make that purchase, this is something I'm going to be able to do, and it's that confidence. Okay, I know that there are a range of scores. Can you talk about the different ranges? Because all scores are not the same.
That's right. So this can be a little bit confusing. And you know, the topic of credit, I think oftentimes people are like, oh my gosh, it's just so much information. I don't know, but it's really not. And so when we think about the range of scores, it's the same way. So the first thing is there are several different scores. There's a Fico score, there's a Vantage score. And so there are also different versions of those scores. So there might be like a Vantage 3.0. And so a typical credit score ranges though from 300 to 850. FICO score is probably the most common. Vantage score is also pretty common, and Vantage score did something really wonderful recently. They have a version 3.0 and version 4.0, and those are the same range as the FICO score. So it ranges from 300 to 850. Isn't that nice?
It is. It is. Wow. Okay. That's news, everybody. If you didn't know that, okay. Wow. So how do those scores, because it's a score, and I know people like to think they don't have a number assigned to them, but I believe every adult at some point does. How do those scores impact your standard of living?
It's huge. It's huge. And I think oftentimes people just think, well, credit is going to determine whether or not I can get a loan or a credit card. And that's true. But it's also going to determine how much you'll pay in interest for the privilege of borrowing that money. But it's also used to determine so many other things. When you are looking to rent an apartment, when you're looking to get utilities turned on, oftentimes when you're looking for insurance. Believe it or not, there are many employers out there that are looking at your credit score to determine whether or not they're going to offer you a job. And so when you think about all the different ways that credit impacts our life, it's big. It not only in the financial sense, but in the financial sense, it's big too, because if we're paying a little bit more in interest for all the things that we have, house, car, loans, all those really add up, and it takes away from our bottom line.
Wow. Now there are 3 credit bureaus, and we know that I'm not sure why there are 3. I guess that's just in a market-based economy, you're going to have 3. Do they interact with each other? Do they complement each other? Can you give us a little understanding how the 3 bureaus work together?
Yes. So there are 3 credit bureaus. It's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and they're competitors. So as you said, that's kind of the way of the world. So we have 3. And they don't typically share information with each other. It's important to know, though, that the credit reporting system in our country is voluntary, which means that lenders and creditors can choose whether or not they're going to report information and who they're going to report it to. So some may report to Equifax, some to all 3, some just to TransUnion, what have you. So when you're thinking about your credit, what it says about you checking your credit report and score, it's important it's important to check your credit report from each of those 3 major credit reporting agencies, because they could contain some different information.
I mean, that's good information to know. So I think there are people that will find out they may very well have a positive credit rating someplace, say an apartment, but if that owner chooses not to report that, that may not be good history that you're even tracking. Okay, I think that's good to know. Okay, I'm going to show a credit report, and can you kind of go over the basic information that a consumer should review when they're looking at a credit report?
Yes. So when you get your credit report, the first thing you want to do is just kind of do a quick comb through to make sure that the information you see is accurate. So at the top, you should see personal information. And like I said, those 3 credit reporting agencies, it's going to look a little bit different, but it's the same basic types of information. So you want to make sure that your personal information is correct, your name, address, things like that. Believe it or not, there's a lot of errors in that section. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to go and look at your trade lines. And this is who you owe and what you owe them. And so you'll see all your different trade lines listed out, and these are the creditors or lenders that you borrowed from. It's going to show you, what kind of credit, whether you're paying as agreed, paying on time, past due, if you are past due, how much. That's a very important section. So you want to make sure that you're looking again for accuracy in that section. If at any time you see something on your credit report that is not accurate, you want to start the dispute process. And then you want to start to look for also things like public records, consumer statements. I think we may talk about that in a moment, but you can make a consumer statement on your report. And things like that. So you want to make sure that the information that you see is accurate, and then take steps to address that. Once you've done that, you want to check for any sort of problem areas. So these would be past due accounts, things like that, public records, bankruptcies, liens, judgments. that maybe they're accurate, but they're on there and they could be hurting you. So then at that point, you want to make a plan to contact those creditors and lenders and try to handle that.
Okay, that's excellent information. So we've gone over the basic information, and we hear that there are a lot of offers out there. Anybody who has a internet account, anytime you're browsing the net, they'll say, oh, you can get this package and it'll show you your credit report. And they may show you like a Fico score or a Vantage score. Can you explain what the difference is in those scores and what that means?
Yeah, so just like credit reporting agencies, there are different scores. I would say that the FICO score is probably the most widely used. That is probably the oldest one, developed by Fair Isaac Corporation. Then the Vantage score is a little bit newer, and I think that score was developed by those three agencies in conjunction. So again, depending on the score and the version of the score, the range is going to be a little bit different. Particularly when you're making a big purchase like a home, that lender might, look at all your different credit reports and take a lot of different things into consideration. But I think for the most part, when we're talking about FICO score, we typically refer to, credit scores as the FICO score, and deal with that range of 300 to 850.
Okay, you're really breaking this down, Tara, so that I think the audience is clearly going to understand why this is important. Now, there are major factors that actually impact that FICO score. So let's talk about that for a minute. If someone's looking at their score and they're like, well, how did they even come up with this? Can you kind of walk us through how you even come up with that number?
Yes, and this is the most important thing that I love to talk about, because I do often think that people are like, what in the world? How do I even manage this? Once you know what that score is made up of, it becomes a whole lot easier to identify what you need to do to get that score where you want it to be. So again, let's talk about the FICO score most commonly used. There are 5 major components of your FICO score, and they're each weighted differently. The first is payment history. This is simply whether or not you're making regular payments on time consistently every single month. This is 35% of your overall score, the biggest piece. Wow. Yeah. The next is utilization or amounts owed. And this is worth 30% of your overall score. So what this means is, let's say you've got a credit limit on a card of $1,000 and you've charged $999. All other things being equal, you're going to have a lesser score. So you want to try to keep that utilization or amounts owed at 30%. That's really kind of the key thing. Okay. If not, you want to shoot for 50 and then go from there. That's important though, because that means that 65% in total of your score between amounts owed and payment history is tied to the budget. Okay. Have you budgeted enough to make sure you're making payments on time and only charging what you can afford to pay back?
Wow. Okay.
And then there are smaller pieces of the credit score too. So the next is 15%, and this would be the length of credit history. And so, this comes into play where, let's say you've got 5 cards and you want to close a couple. Again, you want to look at all the different factors, but all of the things being equal, you'd want to close the cards that you've had that are the newest. Okay. And then there are 2 other factors that are worth 10% each, and that is mix of credit. And so this is just, are you positively managing, student loans, an auto loan, a credit card, and a mortgage? And so you get a better situation there. And then the next is inquiries. And so this is any time that you're applying for credit. This is worth 10% of your overall score. And I forgot to mention. So that's another thing that you'll see on your credit report is an inquiries section. And so that's 10% of your overall score. That's hard inquiries though, where you are applying for credit. And so all those things together come up to make your credit score. So again, once you know what those are, it's like, oh, okay, so I got to clean this payment history up, make these payments on time, charge what I can afford to pay back, and I'm going to figure it out,
Couple of things, right?
Right.
Okay. How long do negative remarks remain on your report?
7 to 10 years. And so typically, yes, but it's 7 to 10 years from the date of last activity. And so, sometimes we'll hear people say, well, I'm just going to wait it out. I'm just going to wait the 7 years, right? So
Oh,
typically it's 7 years for credit cards, accounts, loans, things like that, 10 years for bankruptcies. But because it's from the date of last activity, that's kind of where you get into trouble. So really the best plan of action is to, if it's yours, try to identify a plan to clean it up.
wow, 7 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, we talked about various entities that use credit, where credit is important, and you mentioned employers. They pull your credit. Uh, is that a hard pull? Is that a soft pull? And typically, what are they looking for?
Yeah, so it's a soft pull. It should not affect your score. You'll know when a potential employer is pulling your credit because they're going to ask you. You're going to have to sign and give permission.
Okay.
But I think typically, this we often see this tied to the type of job that you're applying for. A lot of times, if we're in the financial services industry, retail industry, maybe dealing with cash, things like that. So I think just like, lenders, employers are using this score to try to predict, risk. They're trying to learn a little bit more about your character and whether or not you might be a good risk.
Wow. Okay. So let's talk about the dreaded credit score drop. Because we do know scores can fluctuate. Can you talk about some of the main reasons that a person could anticipate a drop or should expect a drop now that you've talked about those percentage categories that make up the score?
Yes. So it's interesting. So you'll see little fluctuations in your credit score, from time to time. And even though those 5 factors make up your score, there's no one size fits all solution. So those factors, it's an algorithm and they're weighted against, an individual and things like that. So there is no, well, if I do this, my score is going to go up or down 5 points. It's not that way.
Okay.
But so that's important to know. But I think for the most part, you really want to be careful of non-payments and late payments. So, the first time you're not going to be able to make a payment on time, contact that creditor, contact that lender, and just ask, what solutions do you have available to try to help me through this? Because, late payments can have a big, big effect on your score. And then, of course, as that progresses, your score is going to drop even further. And then once we start dealing with something like judgment, bankruptcy, lien, things like that, then we're going to see an even bigger drop. So again, get that budget sound. And the first moment that you're going to have a problem, pick up the phone, have a conversation, and just see what options are available to help.
Because the creditor may be able to come up with some plan to get you caught up where it doesn't maybe result in a hit. If they say, look, you got to us before, this is like a 30-day late.
Exactly.
We got a special program, we can work with you to do something so that it doesn't affect your credit report. So you can't ignore the lender when you're in trouble. You need to get on the phone and talk to them.
Yeah, you got to. And believe it or not, they want to help. They want to help. They are not in the business of seeing people go past due and stuff. They want to if they can. So you got to try.
Okay, now I found this interesting as I was doing the research for the show, that paying off an account can actually drop your score or impact your score. Can you talk about why that could happen?
It's anytime you pay something off, you're changing stuff, right? So when we think about the number of cards you have, whether you open or close cards, your utilization, how much you're carrying in available credit, you're changing those numbers. So oftentimes, folks will say, well, if I just apply for 5 cards and don't use them, then my utilization is going to go up. But things like that could backfire. Like I said, because it's an algorithm and it's applied to everybody's unique situation. So typically what we recommend is don't open or close accounts unnecessarily. Don't, try to do that. Just try to effectively manage what you have, identify what you need, and then keep it to a sort of I don't want to say a minimum, but to a safe number, to a comfortable number. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, I think we talked about the hard pulls and the soft pulls, but you said those inquiries can affect your credit. So say you're shopping I want to make sure I understand that shopping for a home and you're trying to get the best loan. Are you saying at some point you need to have a plan so that you don't have 5 banks that are looking at it or 4 banks? Or do they look at, say, okay, all these things happen together? Or do they say, no, there's 8 or 9 inquiries on here and that's going to affect your credit?
Yeah, so great question. So especially when you're making a big purchase, but really any purchase, you got to do your homework. You got to find the best deal, the best rate. You got to be, happy and comfortable and making sound financial choices. So with a large purchase like that, you want to rate shop kind of close together. I think it's a 2-week period where, you've identified potential lenders that could be good and you're shopping close together, the product that you want. And now you're just out there doing your homework. So that's going to help you. Okay. And again, keep in mind that these things, including inquiries, are used by lenders to determine risk. So if I'm going all over Dayton and I'm applying for everything I can find and I'm not quite sure why, I can be a little risky, right? But if I have a plan, I want to buy a car, I know it's going to cost $15,000. I know this is where I want to get it from. These are the 5 banks that I think might be good, and I want to check it all out. And I do that within a week. I look a lot less risky. So, always when you think about it like that, it's like, well, if somebody asked me for $20, I would think about first, I'm going to get that money back. So it's kind of the same thing, but just on a bigger scale.
Okay, so then is that potentially where that consumer statement, I know that you said that there's a section on the credit report where you can actually put your own statement there. What kind of things would you put in that statement so that the potential creditors can read that?
Yes. I think the biggest reason people use that is things like identity theft or fraud, things that it's like, oh my gosh, I've done all the right things. And look at this, I have a big mess here and it's taking me a long time to clean it up. So, that consumer statement is perfect for things like that. It's limited to 100 words. So you want to make sure that you're concise and to the point. But, for things like that, sort of out of control things, maybe major medical situations that you're dealing with, and here's the plan, would be the perfect thing to use that consumer statement for. So yeah, identity theft, fraud, things that are sort of out of your control and you're fixing them. But again, if we're being honest about it, if I've got trouble with my credit, it didn't happen overnight. And so I most certainly can fix that, but that's not going to happen overnight either. And so that consumer statement is a great place for somebody to say, this was completely out of my control. I've taken all the right steps. We're handling this identity theft, and here's where we are.
Okay. Wow. What impact do errors have? I know we talked about the dispute process and reviewing that report because it can have errors on it. Errors can drop your score if there's something on there that either doesn't belong to you or it's a misrepresentation of what you actually did. So can you speak about errors?
Absolutely. So errors crop up all the time. There's one person that's responsible for checking that credit report and making sure it's accurate, and it's you and me or whoever, right? It's that person. And so, errors happen. It's reporting errors. It's things that should have come off or didn't, whatever. But they can have a huge impact because they affect the score just like anything else. So if you made an on-time payment, but it was reported as late erroneously, that's going to hurt your score. So it's huge. I'll tell you that this is quickly. I've been doing this for years, over 20 years, financial wellness or just training in the financial services industry. And I started a little personal experiment. It has nothing to do with work, but it's personal. Every time I would go out there and teach a credit class, I would ask the question, how many of you have looked at your credit report in the last 12 months? Hands would go up. Those of you who have looked at it, how many of you have seen information or, caught something that wasn't yours? Maybe it was just, your name was wrong or whatever, but there was an error on your report. And do you know that I have never had a situation where I've asked the question and at least not one person has said, yeah, that happened to me. My name was misspelled or something bigger. And so, we know that this is frequent. We know that it happens and we have to check it, but Over the years, I've thought, my goodness. Now, one day I'll ask the question, and thankfully nobody will raise their hand, but it hasn't happened. So you gotta look at that credit report. You gotta make sure it's accurate. It's big.
It's a huge, huge, big deal. So people, when you're watching this, if you have never looked at your credit report, you need to do that, because that's important. That is a huge indicator, and it will have a huge impact on your quality of life. So you talked about these reports. How do we get a report? How does this person get a report?
Okay, so as consumers, we are entitled to a free copy of our credit report every 12 months. And oftentimes we can get more, but officially you want to visit annualcreditreport.com. So that's annualcreditreport.com, all one word. You're going to answer some public record questions to make sure it's you. Don't get nervous about that. It's legit. And then you can choose the report that you want to see. So you can choose between Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. Again, we are entitled to one from each credit reporting agency. So typically what I recommend is do maybe every 4 months, get one, so that you're looking within a year, you're looking at every credit report on there, and it's free.
Wow. Now, how can people, they've heard all this and they're overwhelmed, and if they're really struggling with credit, or this is just too much or overwhelming for them, how can you help them if they wanted to reach out to you?
Yes, you call me, so we can help. And so I love this question, because there's, one thing I want to say is, like I said, if you're having trouble, it probably didn't happen overnight. And so you want to be real careful of people who are offering to clean your credit for a certain amount of money. Be careful about things like that. If you are struggling with debt, repayment, budgeting, anything like that, reach out to us. Our organization is a nonprofit. We'll do that initial session to understand your situation. It's absolutely free, help you build the budget, and then look at next steps. If you're struggling to pay down debt and you need some help, a debt management plan might be right for you. And that's where we will work with your creditors to try to lower your interest rates and get you paid out of debt in 3 to 5 years. So again, contact us. Our website is moneymanagement.org. It's all one word. Okay. You can also call us 866-889-9347. I had to write it down to make sure I was telling you the truth.
But I'll put it up so people can see it as well.
And schedule that initial session today. Like I said, that initial session is free. We're a nonprofit. We're really just trying to get the word out and help folks that need help.
Well, Tara, I always give my guests the last word. What do you want to leave the audience with? And we'll just close with you.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, if I could say anything, it would be that just start. It's never too late to start. When we think about financial wellness and creditworthiness, you said at the top of the conversation, it is one of those things that we should all be talking about, but we don't. And I'm not sure why, but let's change the dialogue for us and our kids and our communities and our neighborhoods. Let's change it. So have the conversations, start to build the budget. If you have questions or you're stuck, call us. We will help you. And then just take that step today. Just start.
Trust me, because this is not going to go away if you ignore it. So you want to try to get your report, give it a look, and then give Tara a call from Money Management International. Thank you so much, Tara, for coming on Tabernacle Talks today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
The larger the gap between your credit score and your spouse, the greater the risk for divorce. It's estimated that about 50% of all Americans don't have one late payment on their credit report. Finally, the average Fico credit score in the U.S. was 710 in 2020.